Hello, everybody. My name is KirkpattieCake. I'm an author and robot, and today we're doing the book review for the final book in LBRY's Stormfront trilogy, Woven. In case you're curious about the Stormfront trilogy, I have reviewed the first two books in this group. You can find them on my channel. But before we get started on this book, just the reminder that LBRY for July is currently open. Check it out in the description below. And LBRY is where I give you guys a prompt, you write a story, and I read your stories in the following month. Some incredible work comes out of LBRY, and I can't wait to see what you guys do next. With that said, on with the show. Now, if you saw my last two book reviews for this trilogy, the real question may be, why did I read the entire trilogy? Well, in part, we've established that I'm kind of a masochist, but aside from that, there's another reason for why I keep going through stuff like this. One is that the stories are short enough in this case that it doesn't feel like it takes that much time to read, as opposed to if this was like, you know, a 200,000 word tome, I might have kind of redressed whether I would finish this or not. The other thing is that by seeing the overall structure of the series, you can spot more ideas of what the author might have been trying to do, what the plan was, themes with the characters or character growth, and I like to see kind of the arc of all of the elements that were introduced or not introduced and how everything works together, and I can't get that full picture without finishing. It's the same reason that I don't like to give feedback or reviews on books that I don't finish, or when I only have like 1 or 2 chapters to go off, because I have to see how all of the elements play together in order to properly review a story or feedback a story. So, to be frank, I did not really enjoy this series. I thought there were ideas in here that could have been great and were really interesting if they had been explored, but they weren't really explored, and so that's what really brought it down for me. And by the end of this book, I was bothered with the conclusion in a way that I would not have been bothered if I had only read the first book and stopped there. And I'll tell you exactly why when we get there. But first, the synopsis. So the book opens with Vic finishing a hard mission in record time because she is the best at everything, as you may recall. As her body overloads from the mission, VC1 lets Vic pass out because she's not dying, so she's not going to initiate any sort of physical help. While unconscious, Vic dreams of being a stranger in the Sunfire Merc Group's science facility. In the dream, she's filled with rage that she wants to cure. She kills a pilot and sneaks off of the base with that man's ship. When Vic wakes up, she's not sure how to take the dream. As she tries to ask VC1 about possible clones, VC1 erases Vic's memory until she's passed out again. When she wakes up, she's disoriented. At this point, it's now thrown in that Alex and Lyle are dating, but you don't ever see them flirting with each other on the page, and you never even see the relationship build throughout the 3 books. It's just sort of hinted at that they're flirting in book 2, and then at this book, it's the start. They're just like, okay, and now they're gay, and they never stop having sex. And that's pretty much the start and the end of the mention of their relationship, to be honest. While Vic showers, she thinks about her latest mission. Children on the Jupiter space station have been kidnapped by a pedo killer. She's traumatized by the things she saw while on that mission and from killing the pedo guy. She asks VC1 if she'll erase the memories, but VC1 says she doesn't have the ability to do that. The trauma of the pedo killer then works up Vic's emotions, and she calls Kelly on the phone to calm her down from having a panic attack. While talking on the phone, Vic asks Kelly if she has a soul, and Kelly assures her that yes, she does have a soul, and it's beautiful. Then Vic hangs up. Moving on, Vic's team is given another job, infiltrate a slave trading operation on a moon. Vic and Kelly are about to argue about how Vic doesn't want Kelly to go on the mission, when Vic is reminded that she's not recognized as human and she may be able to marry Kelly, but she can't do it in a legal way because she's not recognized as having rights. However, Kelly's worried about Vic since the last mission emotionally damaged her by making her kill people. This, however, forgets that Vic has killed people in previous books and did not show any trauma there. I mean, she didn't even show trauma when she killed Rodwell in the first book, and this guy was a pedo killer. That is, he was a pedophile who killed the children as well. Vic admits that the worst part about this situation is that she doesn't look like herself. They've redone her so that she is in camouflage because she's going undercover. She also complains about how she feels like changing her appearance to do different missions feels like cheating since it helps her win. But she doesn't at all bring up how the robot parts of her also make everything easier and pretty much make her OP in every single situation. But that's not cheating. Vic also explains that VC1 can't extract memories from her, but that's okay because she deserves to be traumatized because she has low self-esteem and therapy for years is apparently not helping her at all. Might be time to hire a new therapist, guys. Vic's worried about Kelly and warns her that she might have to do things that she doesn't want to do while on this job, and she hates it. She especially hates it because it reminds her of how much of a robot she is, that she's following orders and putting on roles for people that she doesn't like, and doing things that she doesn't like, and doing things that she doesn't really want to do in order to finish jobs, like all of the other humans on her team. But it's different for her because it proves that she's a programmed robot, even if everybody on her team is also doing things they don't want to do. The undercover operation here is a complete joke because though Vic has a new name and a new look, Kelly doesn't. Kelly is using her normal look and her normal first name, even though she's the daughter of a diplomat, and it's kind of really dangerous for her to be going into this situation. But I digress. The team arrives on the slave trader moon, and Jax, the slave trader boss, is immediately impressed and delighted to have them. After being disarmed, the crew is taken underground to where the actual facilities are. They cross over an acid lake where bat creatures hang on the ceiling only to attack a Vic because metal gets them excited and hungry. To hide that she's a robot, she hands over a spare gun that she'd kept hidden in a pocket and says that's the reason why the bats attacked her, even though it's not made of metal. Unfortunately, this also reminds Vic that she's more machine than human, and she falls into depression. The only thing that keeps her from screaming, crying, and wailing on the floor is Kelly's presence there. Once they reach the other side of the lake, the team is cleaned up from the attack and they're shown their lodgings. After settling in, Vic, Kelly, and many of the other slave buyers are shown to the stage where the bidding will start. A couple of women have sex on stage to get the appetites hot. Kelly's disturbed by the emotions of lust and murder in the air, and she also feels something particularly psychotic around. Vic spots a woman named Clara Hawthart, important because she's a One World Government Secretary of Treasury. While the auction/sex show goes to intermission, VC1 informs Vic that Clara is there looking for her daughter who went missing from a BDSM club some months ago. As part of the intermission, all of the high roller clients are given a special sort of chocolate which makes them unbelievably horny and also feel the sexual vibes of whatever it is they're watching. This is a special project that Jax is working on, and Vic eats one. Of course, they didn't tell you what the chocolates were, they were just delivered to people. Vic is tortured by her sexual needs, and Kelly climbs under the table to take care of her then and there. A dude also goes on stage with a whip, and Vic starts thinking back to her Dr. ex-girlfriend who smacked her around once. After the auction show ends, everyone returns to their rooms. However, Vic isn't cool with just hanging around, so she starts sneaking around the facility to gather information and find the slave quarters. Vic eventually runs into Clara's bodyguard and gets some intel from him while bragging about how her team is the best team, and she may just be a robot, but she is the best robot. At this point, I've also forgotten that Vic has a broken rib and is still running around, but I can't exactly remember how she got it. I think it has to do with the bats on the boat, but I cannot recall. And then she's still just kind of flagrantly running around this facility, getting ready for a fight. But don't worry, broken ribs don't stop Vic. As Vic runs around the facility, alarms eventually go off, so Vic and Kelly alert the Fighting Storm team it's time to land and help the people there. A gunfight ensues, air is sucked out of the underground, most of the people die, especially those who work there, some slaves die, but many escape, including the stolen daughter of Clara Hawthart named Cynthia. While everything collapses, Vic runs back inside the facility to find a Jax and murder him with her own hands, openly defying not only her programming that tells her not to go, but orders from her superior that also are come back. She succeeds in her mission to mercilessly pummel him, and on her way out, she sees a mutilated corpse of a blonde woman that makes her think too much of Kelly. As Vic makes her way back out of the underground facility, the bat creatures by the lake grab her and drop her into the acid water. It melts off her skin and reveals that she's really just a Terminator-like robot underneath it all. Everyone on Vic's team sees her for what she is. She feels like human trash, or rather inhuman trash, and they eventually escape. She's fixed up and her appearance is returned to normal. While Vic spends a lot of time unconscious getting surgeries, she also has dreams of someone else sneaking around the ship, being angry and doing bad things like murdering people. Meanwhile, Kelly's having sex dreams about Vic until she wakes up feeling disturbed, like she's being watched. Yet when she goes to the security control to see if anybody has been in her room, there's no evidence on video of anyone ever being there. While in the middle of one surgery, Vic wakes up and starts freaking out at all of the medical equipment around her, reminding her that she is not human. When Kelly runs in, she's screaming, "Don't look at me, I'm ugly," but Kelly tries to comfort her, assuring her that they're getting married as soon as this mission is over. Vic tells Kelly that she's been having bad dreams, and that's pretty much the end of that. Suddenly, everyone's back at the normal moon base, and Vic's giving lectures to classrooms when Officer Sanderson calls Vic to a private one-on-one meeting in the sex club on the moon base, but no telling Kelly, though, this is kind of a secret mission, super under wraps. Vic meets her and learns about someone running around the moon base brutally murdering people who look like Kelly, blonde bombshell with big boobs. Vic calls Kelly and invites her to the private meeting, then informs Kelly of everything that she's learned, but only after Kelly manipulates, guilts, and threatens Vic with more talk of, "I thought that there was going to be no more secrets between us. What happened to that, Vic?" Kelly is really weird at this moment with her internal monologue, saying that she wants Vic to think that she has free will, even though she doesn't, and she's under Kelly's control all the time. It's kind of a really telling moment, and it's really weird. With Kelly now at the private meeting between Sanderson and Vic, Sanderson says the killer's probably not human, and Vic takes offense to this, even though she continually calls herself not human throughout the entire series. It's only okay when she does it, though, but you're not allowed to affirm her fears or think anything like she does. Vic gets up, bordering on hysterical from that minor comment, and doesn't believe Sanderson when she says that's not what she meant. Vic's AI system is also offended at being called a device. Kelly releases Vic's emotions at the table to settle her down, and now suddenly Vic knows about the whole thing of being a clone, and Sanderson knows that VC1 is sentient. An officer shows up to arrest Vic because she looks sketchy, and she looks a lot like the person's showing up on the cams murdering people. But instead of going with the cop, Kelly and Vic run with help from Alex and Lyle, who point guns at law enforcement so that they can get away. They then suggest starting their own business, but Vic says that she can't run away and do that. She has no ability to defy her programming or her orders because she's a slave to them. They also talk about how Vic should pretty much be running the fighting storm because it's her father's Merc operation to begin with, but this completely ignores how the first book explained that Vic didn't want anything given to her because of nepotism or because of her father's name, so she deliberately changed her name and didn't let anyone know that she was related to Oz. Yet in this conversation, they act like the company was stolen from her. Vic tells the boys that she can't run away with them to start their own Merc thing, and if they tried, that'd be considered traitorous, and her programming would tell her to kill them. Alex and Lyle then reevaluate Vic's humanity in disgust, while Carl, the leader of Vic's special ops unit, shows up and says, "Hey, I need you for this special mission." He then drugs Vic, she passes out, and they're off to the new mission. The mission is this. Vic is to be admitted to a mental hospital where they will wait for the Vic clone VC2 to show up. Then they will capture her. The mental facility is treating Vic like she has killed all of those people and she's mentally insane. It also houses non-criminal patients in the same ward as the criminal patients and allows people to walk around. It is also a real working facility without any great guards behind it, which is kind of strange since they're basically implying that they want to create a mousetrap for a psychotic killer to come here, but that puts all of these regular people in danger and there is no discussion about that. So, okay. Now it's time for like 15 chapters of Vic just going to therapy and hanging out at the hospital for a while because VC2 doesn't show up for the longest time. It's very slow, feels pointless, and the therapy introduced in this book is it's bad in my opinion. Eventually, Vic is tired of working with the therapist that she's given and tells her, "Look, maybe I just have to accept that I'm part robot. Can we stop working on these issues the way that you want to do them and I'll just accept me for what I am?" Like, wow, amazing. And the therapist acts like this idea of self-acceptance or client coming to realization has never been done before because she's like, I guess that we can try this your way, and then if it doesn't work out, then we'll do it my way. But it's pretty much the premise of basic, classic psychoanalysis. So I don't know why she'd be so impressed with this direction of self-realization. There's also a mirror maze that the therapist set up and keeps making Vic go through to force her to look at herself, and Vic gets emotional and drained and breaks down just having to look at herself in a mirror. It's while she's in the mirror maze that VC2 finally shows up and murders pretty much the entire wing of the hospital, including Vic's therapist. Probably good riddance. Staff, guards, undercover Merc agents, patients, pretty much everybody you can imagine, because despite weeks of hanging out in this facility waiting for the psychotic RoboCop, no one was ready for her to actually show up. So they all died. Vic gets into the final battle with VC2 where she's pretty much losing. Though she does have broken ribs and bad damage, nothing is enough to actually slow Vic down. VC2 is on top of her and going to break her head open, but then at the last second, Kelly picks up a gun and shoots VC2, killing her instantly. This doesn't come with a lot of baggage, as Kelly kept telling herself right before that moment that VC2, who is a clone of her girlfriend/fiancé, in every way except personality, is not human, so it's okay to kill her. I should also mention that through all of this, where this entire staff of this hospital has been killed, Kelly has not felt a single bit of empathic grief at all. Where back in book 1, she deliberately had Kelly debilitated, crying under the table because somebody got stabbed in the neck and died. But in this, when more than a dozen, maybe 2 dozen or more people died, there is no reaction from Kelly. Would have been an interesting area to go, but you can't have anybody debilitated if it's not what you wanted to do. In a last-ditch effort to survive, VC2's programming tries to merge with Vic's inside of Vic's body, but VC1 greets VC2 in the brain, and they both perish. Though the sentience is gone, Vic still has the benefit of the computer system numbing her pain, feeding her adrenaline, and making her strong to get through her beat-up body. Vic then picks Kelly up and they sneak out the back of the hospital before the military or any other Merc operatives can recover either of them. They jump a fence together and they just kind of run off, get into a spaceship, and disappear into space. When Kelly wakes up, she is in a nice cabin. It turns out that Vic has been giving VC1 the leftovers from her paycheck for years, and VC1 has been making investments, so now Vic is filthy stinking rich, and she'll be even richer when she gets her father's estate. Apparently, the Earth government has also been negotiating with the Fighting Storm, telling them that they're not allowed to chase after Vic, and if they do, they're going to get in trouble for the whole cloning business. Though I thought the cloning business was on the Sunfires, so I'm not really sure there. Vic and Kelly then have sex, but not without Vic mentioning the rape again from book 1, because you seriously have to squeeze as much reference out of that as possible, don't you? It's just mentioned, by the way, that she has a bit of difficulty, that she's trembling a little bit, and then they just get on with the sex. So it really doesn't do anything but just remind you that it's there. Even when it was already said that it's not a problem anymore after the end of book 2, she still has to bring it up. I love it. Absolutely love the squeezing out of the trauma there. So, the story basically ends with them hanging around the log cabin, drinking champagne, having relations, and thinking of starting their own Merc or private hire business. Clara Hawthorne is also working on helping Vic be recognized as human again so that she can legally marry Kelly. Meanwhile, Vic's retina display shows a metaphorical image hinting that VC1 isn't dead, and the book ends with Vic laying with Kelly and the narration going, "Our hearts make us human, and love makes us whole." That is the last line of the book. Oh yeah, and in their Merc organization, they're talking about having Carl work for them. Carl? Robert? Might have been Robert. And Alex and Lyle, because the crew's got to stick together. So that's the end of the book. That's the end of the series. Let's get into the comments. How are you feeling, everybody? So number one that I want to talk about is the continuity issues. It's necessary to mention that this novel starts off with Vic asking about clones and saying that she always wondered if there were clones. But I got to point out that I read this right after reading book 2, and while Vic was literally in the lab where she woke up and was informed that she was a clone, she not once asked about clones. She didn't ask VC1 about clones. She didn't look around the facility wondering if there were other clones. She literally never mentioned clones, showed no interest in it whatsoever, and now she's pretending that she did. I'm not trying to rag on the author or anything, but this is the kind of detail that makes a story come off as opportunistic and unplanned, because otherwise you would have planted those seeds earlier. Instead, it feels like she got to this book and was like, oh, I want to work on that, and so brought it in later. It's kind of one of the reasons why I think it's better to have some idea of where you want your story to go if you're going to do 3 books for that series. Maybe it's not always possible, but at least have a general idea of book 1 is going to be this, book 2 is going to be this, and book 3 is going to be this, so you can plant seeds for all 3, if you can't possibly have at least first drafts done of all of them before the first one gets published. This is one of the things that I think is especially hard with series, and it's one of the reasons I'm glad that I don't do series, because this is keeping the continuity and having references for things is a very complicated process, and the authors that can do that with their series are very impressive to me. I'm going to be exercising that a little bit in Dead End Drive 2, which is going to be a prequel to Dead End Drive. That comes out next next fall. And so I'll be having to make sure to keep details continuous between the two timelines. But it's hard. It's hard, and I understand that it's hard. But it does stand out to me as a reader, especially if I go from reading one book to two, and then suddenly the characters are changing the entire way that they responded to a situation. The other major continuity issue for me was that VC1 being able to censor Vic's memories. At the end of book 2, when she brought VC1 back to life, she straight up ignored some of Vic's bad memories, and it seemed like no big deal. In this book, she had no control over Vic's memories, so she says, unless it affected her too. Again, this reads like opportunism for whatever works at the time for what the author wants to happen, as opposed to having logic within the story and sort of a framework of rules to live by. This depletes the tension and makes everything seem pointless, as the author can change and do whatever she wants at any time without consequence, because we live in the moment instead of following a set of rules. And rules don't just exist in settings for magic, high fantasy, whatever. You have to have them with this technology stuff too in order to make them make sense, or this kind of stuff stands out. But that's just how I feel with sci-fi and fantasy. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. When it comes to the descriptions in this book, there really aren't much. Each scene really isn't set up, and you don't get a sense of where you are or what you're doing or what is around you. The sensory information really isn't used all that much, and I think more attention, and maybe that's a me thing, because I've heard more often now as I put more work out there that I use a lot of sensory detail, and so I like to put people in places by mentioning these sensory detail items, and so maybe that stands out to me more when I'm reading, because I'm not getting as much of that. I don't personally look for long, extensive prose about writing, but just a couple of things to make me think of somewhere. So if you're in the hospital, talk about your clean, pristine white counters with the smell of with the sterile smell of lemon and water or whatever, just a couple of things to put me there and paint the image. The only color in the room was the fake tree in the corner with leaves that were too big to be real. Just a couple of things to paint the picture and put it in your head of where exactly I am. This book really didn't do that much, but I don't think this author really had much of a focus on setting up the scene. I think more attention was given in some cases to gore mentioned at the beginning with the pedo killer, the murder with the Kelly lookalikes, and then with the hospital staff at the end when they were all dead, but that felt more like it was there for shock value. It felt like an attempt at body horror, but it was still pretty light. Since I kind of consider this more of a romance book, and it may not be a strict romance, but it leans heavily on the romance, and every one of the books ends with them having sex, so it leans on that side for me. I think it's just somebody who doesn't typically write intense action scenes or disturbing content trying to write some disturbing content, and it still comes up a little short because it's not really what she tends to do, but it will seem like a lot for her general reader. With the lack of time spent on description, creating setting, and world building, my feelings on this is that the author just wanted to get to writing character interactions, specifically between Kelly and Vic, because she really likes them. So the setting just become a vague reason for the characters to interact and somewhere for them to be, but it's ultimately not that important. The pacing of this book was still off, kind of like the other two. It suffered from the plot saying it's this one thing, but the intended or the stated plot taking at least half the book to actually get started and then getting crammed there at the end. On the Goodreads page and in the plot blurb, the main conflict is stated to be the evil clone and Vic, as well as Vic having self-image issues after falling into the lake. And while she does have low self-esteem the whole time, the clone doesn't come into the plot until maybe the last third of the book, aside from a few dream sequences here and there. Sanderson also comes up to Vic with random murders of women that look like Kelly out of nowhere, and it's just a dramatically different shift than the first half of the book set in the sex slave chamber. And then the final third of the book, or the final quarter of the book, is all in the hospital, and all of these things seem like very different stories that don't actually build on each other. The only thing that they have in common is Vic has bad dreams in all three spaces, but they really don't connect. And that brings attention to the pacing, especially when we're in the most tense part of the book, the third act, the final portion leading up to the climax of the book and of the series. But most of Act 3 is spent just hanging out inside of a mental hospital, chilling and going to therapy. There really isn't any tension, and there's no building of action, there's no drive, there's no character doing something. It's the character waiting around for something to happen, for pretty much the entirety of the third act. To make it just a little bit more clear, the main drama with the clone doesn't come in until maybe about 43 to 48% of the way through, and then it's pretty much off to the hospital after that for another 30 or 40% of the book. Meanwhile, you've got some serious midpoint sag as both Kelly and Vic are going in and out of sleep around the 50% mark until they get to the whole Sanderson business. Since I've already talked about the characters in the first 2 book reviews for this, I'm just going to talk about Vic's instability. She's basically forced into therapy for the final third of the book. Funny that the Fighting Storm hired her a therapist to go with her everywhere, but years of this hasn't helped her mentally. Now, I've asked this question for the previous books and I'm going to ask it again. How was Vic not forced into retirement for her emotional and mental instability? She's tried to kill herself before in 2 previous books. I think in one of the books, she tried to kill herself twice. Was it the first book that she did that? In this book, she has a breakdown during a job because she's not prepared to kill people. She has another breakdown because she's attacked and she's thinking about how she's not human. You can definitely tell me that she's physically the best soldier on the team because of the benefits that she has. But she's mentally not there. She's emotionally not there. She's not their best soldier because she's a danger to everyone on base and everyone in her team, as seen through VC2, since VC2's whole shtick is that she is Vic if Vic didn't have therapy. And this isn't even to mention that the narrator felt like it needed to bring up the rape from the end of the first book a couple of times throughout this, but the rape really didn't stop Vic from doing anything that she wanted to do, as pretty much nothing stopped Vic from doing what she wanted to do. It felt like it was milking the trauma, and that bothered me, but it was also never dealt with. Like, I was actually very bothered that at the end of book 2, the way that they dealt with the rape was just don't bring it up throughout the entirety of the book, and then she comes back to life, and VC1 is like, and you're cured. No more trauma from the rape, you just don't even have to think about it anymore, sweet cheeks. That's literally how it happened. She didn't have to work for the fix, or she didn't have to work toward bettering her mental state, which is also one of the reasons why she probably fell backwards, is it was just a miracle cure. But also there's no continuity. You fix something in book 2 and then it's back in book 3. You fix something in book 1 and it's back in all the other books. So, I don't know. The other thing that really stands out with me in this character is that ultimately there is no difference between Vic and VC1, as both of them have pretty much the same personality, though VC1 might be slightly muted. VC1 acts more like Vic's conscience than another character altogether, and all throughout the series, the point of making Vic a robot was to make her a super soldier and to zap her of her emotions. However, her being implanted with technology and having brain damage did nothing to stop her from having emotions, and actually made her a worse soldier for it by making her emotions exaggerated. Through the years of remaining with Fighting Storm, who were the ones that did this to her, none of them tried to upgrade her tech to make her closer to what the initial goal was. They kind of just let her keep living with broken technology in her head that made her emotionally and mentally unstable. So at the end of the day, with this technology in her head, I don't really understand the point of it, of having its own personality, of it even existing, other than to make Vic OP and emotionally unstable when it's convenient. I wish there had been more contrast in personality, more challenge, and even more sassiness from VC1, because you can have somebody who is robotic and sassy and emotional, but in a robotic way. I mean, look at Gladys from Portal. She is the perfect example. There were even times when I'd been hoping that VC1 would challenge Vic's depression and go, yeah, bitch, you're not human, just get over it, move on with your life. What do you think is going to happen? Either kill yourself or get on with your life. And where VC1 would be pushing Vic, and that could have been a great way to either make Vic worse and more emotionally unstable, or kind of force her into acknowledging this, I might just have to accept what I am. It could have been such an interesting way to push her to have VC1 be kind of like Gladys, or is kind of a bitch, and have, oh, you're so weak, how are you letting all your emotions like this? Just let me take over if you're just going to be like this, because VC1 has to listen to that mentality by being in her head. How is VC1 not getting annoyed by this irrationality? Oh, because VC1 was basically still Vic. In the end, it kind of made it feel like Vic was just a girl posting on social media about how tortured she felt in order to get attention. So the logical issues, as you know, I focus a lot on logical issues within the plot, character choices, rationale, all of this stuff. This is where I really, really focus on in a story, and it's where stories can really fail for me. So continuously, Vic and others explain how expensive Vic and VC1 were to make, so her programming has made it so that she must preserve herself over everything else. But I have the question that if she is so valuable, why do they keep sending her into the most dangerous positions that they possibly can where they know she very well may die or at least get damaged. I get using your best soldier in some of your harder missions, but the explanation of just how valuable she is compared to how the storm treats her doesn't really add up, and I never see just how valuable and how expensive she is, because they fix her up no problem and then they send her back out in the most dangerous situations again, no problem. Throughout each book, Vic also brings up how she can't defy orders. She must follow programming and she has no choice. This is what makes her a slave to the fighting storm, she says. At some point, she even compares herself to the individuals at the slave trade show, despite how she got to where she is through personal choice and they were abducted. This declaration of slave to the storm becomes a problem in two ways. Number one, it becomes a point of tension about halfway through when Vic says that she can't run away from the storm and she cannot defy them in any way when Alex and Lyle are talking about running away. Earlier in the same exact novel, we see her openly defy not only her programming but also her superiors' orders in order to kill Jax, and she acknowledges that she's overpowering her programming. This undermines the whole idea that Vic is not in control, and this contradiction is never brought up. The story never addresses the defiance, the characters in the novel never address the defiance. She's not even reprimanded or examined for how she was able to defy her obedience programming. This means that she was making excuses for why she couldn't run away when clearly she did have the control. Either that, or we're back to more opportunism when Vic is only powerless when the author wants her to be, but is completely OP when she wants her to be. Thus, there are no stakes, there is nothing in Vic's way, and all of the struggles we see in the story is therefore exploiting the characters and forcing drama, not because of logical consequences to actions or the struggle to make characters grow. Now to a smaller detail thing. When Alex and Lyle are pretending to be Vic's bodyguard on the slave planet and she gets attacked, they're just standing around to watch. They're supposed to protect her, and this falls into the trope that I really don't like of all men are either useless, evil, or love interests, just as every male character in this book and all the previous ones do the same. The boys can't help Vic because Vic can only save herself. They can't even have just a minor shining moment for them to help her and her stand up and go, hey, thanks for that. And give her a moment to think that others might care about her. You know how big some small moment like that could have been for a book like this? But every male character in here has to be either useless or evil or a combination of the two. Again, we have moments where random people that are just passing by either flirt with Kelly or Vic, and then when they get blown off, they swear at them because, of course, obviously. At the part where Vic is taken to the mental hospital, they also give her a data scrammer, which is meant to stop VC2 from being able to connect with VC1 and track where she's at. This didn't really make sense to me because they were using Vic as sort of bait for a mousetrap. So if they wanted VC2 to come to VC1, why would they data scramble so that she couldn't necessarily track the signal as well? The signal is never turned off because it wasn't used to buy them time, and this is really never brought up at all ever again after she's handed the data scrambler. I didn't understand why Kelly would put down her emotional mental shields in the middle of the slave trading facility, especially if she knew that she would become debilitated by bad vibes. This is kind of the worst place to just curiously put out your feelers when you're as sensitive and psychic as Kelly is, and she really had no reason to do it. She just kind of did it. No motive, no reason, and no consequences for the action. I'm not really sure how Vic was dropped in the acid lake and had her skin burned off, but still had nerve endings to feel pain with, and it specifically mentioned nerve endings. Kind of a weird combination. Conveniently in the story, Vic could now get drunk because VC would let her. It would have been more fun if Vic kept trying to drink to desperately get drunk, and VC1 wouldn't let her and then taunted her for it. So Vic just whined at VC1 and maybe even pretended to be drunk, and VC1 was like, "You're ridiculous and fine. Stop. You're annoying." But it didn't happen. There were times when the characters were well aware of their own plot holes and tried to share the logic before you could ask, like Kelly having a direct link to Vic's emotions from very far away. She recognizes that she doesn't normally have this ability, but the building that they were in was made of metal, so obviously emotions could bounce off of the walls and reach further like a satellite dish. It's at this point that I'm just buying this whole book and this whole series as a personal fantasy instead of having any sort of logic or consistency throughout any of it. VC2's explanation for evil was just that she was Vic without the therapy and all of Vic's bad memories in one without any of the good. She's pretty much just a flat character of evil for the sake of being evil, which really undermines the whole theme of the series if you ask me, and we'll get to that a little bit more in a second here. Another thing is that Vic is admitted to a mental hospital and her records say that she has killed several people, but she walks around freely with no guards, no handcuffs, no nothing, freedom to go anywhere, make her own food. It's just like, it kind of felt like a fetishistic backdrop to some extent, and I should know. I love asylum atmosphere, and it's not because they make me feel at home. I swear. Tell me though, was Vic supposed to be considered dangerous by these people at the hospital or no? Because no one acted like she was, but it was specifically mentioned that everybody knew that she killed at least 7 people and was kind of mentally insane. So tell me that one. Now here are some alternatives I thought of while reading this book, first starting with slave trade and Jax. What would have been interesting and would have still followed the logic the author presented would have been if Vic personally did want to kill Jax, that's fine, but her programming did not allow her to defy it. This meant that Jax got away and Vic was both angry and distressed knowing that she couldn't stop Jax even though she wanted to, because he would then go on to victimize more, set up his slave trade somewhere else, or he obviously already had an alternative location. Then the whole plot arc of book 3 could have included Vic trying to figure out how to defy the storm and finding her independence within her programming, breaking the programming. This would have given her ultimate independence payoff because we saw her not able to get what she wanted and then struggle with the fallout and then have to figure out a way to get what she wants. Instead, she gets what she wants when she wants it and then she complains like she didn't. What also would have been an interesting place to take this book would have been to give VC2 a chance to actually redeem herself. As it stands now, VC2 is a see-through bad guy, only bad, no chances, and everybody in the book is just ready to kill her straight up. Even Kelly can justify looking at VC2 as just a monster and thus is able to kill her without remorse and without really a second thought. However, the end of the book says that love is what makes you human without ever having presented VC2 the opportunity for love or redemption or chance. VC2 is literally her fiance or girlfriend who was given no chance to heal. Think about the implications of that. This is her girlfriend if her girlfriend was not given any chances. An alternative way to have played this would have been to introduce VC2 earlier, maybe even on the slave trader mission with Kelly thinking that VC2 was Vic, running into her in the hallways because she was worried and she was looking for Vic in the halls. And because Kelly clearly reconnected empathetically with Vic immediately at the end of book 2, she could have thought that VC2 was also Vic. Then Kelly could have struggled with the intense bad vibes and emotions and trauma inside of VC2, but also once learning that VC2 was not Vic, she could have offered to help VC2 work through her problems and try to stabilize her. If VC2 was offered the option of peace or violence and chose violence, then the ending would have made more sense because a character who was a monster chose to be a monster instead of just straight up being one and never given a chance. But as it stands, VC2 is never offered any opportunity to reject humanity. She is just apparently born without humanity and so she deserves to die. This ends up meaning that the only difference for Kelly about what makes someone human or not is if she's sleeping with them. At least that's how it comes off, and quite honestly, the ending had me seriously bothered. I'm not going to say irritated, but I was bothered. I mean, you shot an exact clone of your fiancé without a problem, and the only difference between the two of them is that one was offered therapy and the other one wasn't. So you labeled the one a monster and shot her without remorse and you felt justified. You're being the judge, jury, and executioner, Kelly, and you're doing it in a really, really shallow way. Worse, this chick is supposed to have studied in school to become an emotional medical expert, and she's still looking at somebody plagued by mental trauma and says the only answer is to put them down because they are a lost cause. Never offering them a chance at redemption, never offering them a chance at healing. They're just, put them down. They're through. They're too damaged to deal with. Put them down. Are you freaking serious? This is the way that you end a series that's all about trauma? Talk about sending messages here. Either you ignore the problems entirely and they're magically fixed at some point, or you see somebody mentally hurting and you put them down because they're a lost cause, so better treat them like Old Yeller. That's what I walked away from this book with, and oh my gosh. All 3 books continually expressed that Vic was human and worth working for because she was not a robot, she was a human inside, and she was worth helping. And your final answer to all of that is just to murder somebody who is exactly like your fiancé but is mentally damaged and needs your help, and instead of helping her, your only solution is the final solution. I know that I'm repeating myself at this, but it is like so insane that this was the ending. I am bothered, can you tell? I had hoped that the author would then approach the cognitive dissonance expressed in this situation in the following couple of pages, and to my surprise, I wasn't surprised. The deep implications of the cognitive dissonance of shooting somebody who is a clone of your fiancé, who is a more damaged version of your fiancé, is never even brought up. It's not recognized. It's after that moment, it's gone. It's gone. It's gone. At risk of repeating myself, books 2 and 3 of the Fighting Storm trilogy felt like fan fiction of the first book to me because the author loves her characters, and believe me, I can feel the love for the main characters. The first book felt like it was actually trying to do something though, presenting philosophical questions like what makes somebody human or consciousness, or having references to the Wizard of Oz built into the story as a part of identifying things, even with Vic having a heart necklace to bring her back to humanity. But all those things slipped away in books 2 and 3, with only the mention of the necklace once in books 3, and I think there was a mention of "we're not in Kansas anymore" that just flooded Vic with memories of her dead father at one point in book 3, and that was pretty much all that you have. It's just sad because I could see where this could go and build character and force Vic and Kelly to face the different difficulties of their relationships and their lives and the traumas that they have in their partnership with the storm. But instead of allowing the characters to hit blocks and grow and hit new blocks and struggle and suffer and become better people, it feels like they're trapped on repeat with never-changing characters and motifs and allegory and references that end up being meaningless by the end of the story. I did want to know that I noticed through multiple books the author did seem to enjoy forcing Vic, especially into humiliating sexual situations, and I had to wonder if this was kind of a fetish. I'm not trying to assume anything, but I did take notice of this specific thing popping up in with this specific character. Aside from the logical issue, clearly, one of the biggest things I think that kills a book or a story for me is when there are no consequences to the characters. They don't suffer, they don't grow, the choices that they make don't make a difference on the story, and if there's trauma involved, they never get to the end of their emotional trauma, or that's never faced, or doesn't matter. In this series, each book sort of ends with, and suddenly everything's fixed and we're good, just to go back to square one at the start of the next book, like nothing happened in the previous book. This takes away from the payoff for the reader, and I know that the author loves these characters. She may not want them to suffer. You can very clearly see the care and the love and adoration she treats Vic and Kelly and VC1 with. In saying that, however, if you don't let your characters suffer, if you don't let limitations and consequences happen, the characters can't grow, they can't change, and they have no payoff for the reader. There's not a struggle, there's not a story. We're not going on a journey or a quest, and there are no stakes. These characters were set up to win, always win, and the emotions and trauma were just there for exploitation or personal fulfillment, with none of the reality that comes with that. And that includes the final realization that Vic has, where she says that it's what's on the inside that matters. It just happens randomly in the swamp of exposition and summary during the therapy sessions. She doesn't work toward it, and then bam, she's fixed. Just like dealing with the trauma of the rape in book 2, where it's ignored and then bam, it's fixed. There's no value in that. We didn't get to see them work for it. It just happened. So that's my review of Woven by LBRY. My final comment is, authors, having everybody in your story be shitbags to or hit on your main characters does not make your main characters more likable. It doesn't make me feel bad for them. It actually has the opposite effect. But that's just me, and I'm just a robot. I'd love to know your comments and the thoughts down below, whether it's about this story, storytelling, some of the comments I had about the story, or dealing with some of these elements. I would love to know your thoughts, and especially, have you read this book? Let me know in the comments below. I know I didn't enjoy it, but I would still recommend you guys read it if you're interested in the story or seeing the elements I'm talking about, so that we can have a conversation. With all that said, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy this sort of content, please remember to like it, share it, subscribe it. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great Monday, and don't die.
The only people who should come are those who want to meet their monsters.
If this is what Agatha wants, I don't know how we can even dispute it.
Show me your teeth.
I change lives, baby.
And I end them. Sweetheart, no bargains hold. Only fools know restraint.
Only losers lose!
If your scissors are dull, may I recommend sharpening them with leather?
I think I hit you.
Mima says I must have a guardian angel.
To enter the ring but abstain from playing is suicidal. Your virtue makes you nothing but a liability.
You're gonna die. You're gonna die. You're gonna die.